Welcome to Citizens Forum. We're back after a few months off, and there's a lot of things have happened in the last few months that we want to catch up on. I have with me today Mazin Al Nahawi, who is also proposing a new program for Shaw called Indigenous Voice. And Mazin's going to be here with me to make comments on a few things that are happening around the region and nationally. So, welcome, Mazin. And why don't you just give us a brief overview of what Indigenous Voice is about and what you're hoping to achieve with it?
First of all, thanks, Walter, for having me on the show. As the name indicates, it's one voice for one indigenous people. The process of if you go around the world and you hear about how the process of colonization, you find out that it's the same story, but now in different geography. So the same issue is going on everywhere, like when indigenous people in Australia, for example, facing some issues will be so similar to the indigenous people here. But the problem is that all these indigenous community are isolated from each other, in spite of they are dealing with one system, kind of mainly rushing for resource minerals and just to make a profit. So for one of the issue for me here living on this land, I realize with the time that I am completely ignorant of the indigenous history on this land, ignorant of their perspective. I'm familiar with it in general because again, I came from Palestine originally, and we have similar kind of process happening there. We face the colonial settler system kind of where expelled the indigenous for the foreigner to come and establish their society on the top of the indigenous society. So I know about that in general, but it's kind of a shame that I don't know the name of the name of the real territory where I'm living in.
Yeah.
So and uh, as you remember, thanks for Jack Atkin during our many talks about Palestine issue, I found out in the end it seemed like to understand the indigenous question here, this is the right things to do for me, even as a Palestinian. The issue there, it's not supposed to be any more a priority for me as much as the priority for where I live and the struggle with the people I'm living in their community.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned. You know, I myself, even though I feel I'm sympathetic with a lot of issues with Indigenous people in Canada, I do not feel that connection that I wish I had. And perhaps this type of program can start some of these conversations that could help fill that gap, let's say, and then, and of course, as you pointed out, as the people talk to each other and they start to compare what's happened to them and what's happened to in other countries, they see the similarities. So good luck with that show, Mazin. I really think it's a great idea.
And actually, we pointed out to Shaw TV that this is the kind of show it's not around, and they approved the show, and it's very nice to start to talk about this perspective and bring it out, and we need all to learn, and especially its history is always part of our present. As you hear lately about reconciliation process, I don't know how we can do to a process called reconciliation without first real acknowledgement. I don't see people agree or know exactly what happened to the indigenous people here. And after that process, then we go to a process I call justice process. They need to compensate these victims. You cannot impose on them reconciliation like imposed on them before treaties.
Exactly.
So the process, it's very long. And one of the latest example we hear about, and this is also related to the news, about the water system. The Liberal government tried to put now about $4 billion in a certain amount of time and how that CBC finished the segment, to upgrade the indigenous or the native community system to the national system. that already tell you that we have two systems here. One, in spite of the indigenous or the native community, it's not that big around, but they need $4 billion to match. That's mean how you tell you how it's deteriorating and how it's ignored. And not only about
How
water.
poor their water quality must have been, and this was a decision that was made by our government. It wasn't by accident. So, lots to cover there, you know, and so much to learn. It's really pretty exciting that you're going to embark on that journey, and I'm really looking forward to seeing these programs and see what transpires. So we have a few other topics that we always like to touch on this show, and because we do watch what's happening around the world, and there are a number of issues that impact us, and local issues too. One that comes to mind is the American elections for the President of the United States. And we're looking at the primary process that's going on there right now, particularly the Democratic process, who has been fraught with difficulties, and there have been lots of charges of unfairness and downright fraud in some cases with how the counting of the votes has gone in some of these primaries. Bernie Sanders, as we all know, is surging in the polls and surging in popularity in the United States. His message is very, very powerful, very hopeful. He's a totally different candidate than what we've ever seen before, although I know you don't see a lot of difference. I see more than a nuance here. Bernie's really talking about some serious issues of trying to democratize the United States and create a free and fair society. Now, what's happened very recently, and I think we just have to bring up with the voters that the California primaries just occurred last week, and there has been a lot of reports of voter suppression and actual voter fraud in the form of ballots not being counted. It's hard to get down to the hard numbers because you go online, but there is a lawsuit that's being developed that's going to bring this to the courts and to iron it out. But as it stands right now, according to Bernie Sanders supporters, he won California in a landslide, and that victory was stolen from them by the Clinton regime. So that's a story we're going to be following in the next several months up to this election. And this is an era that we've never seen quite in American politics, when the injustices have been so blatant, and the mainstream media not seemingly willing to cover it.
In spite of all the odds, Clinton still managed to keep going up. You have from Benghazi scandal here. I mean, her term on foreign the ministry, what they call it in the United States,
She's
the
Attorney
Secretary
General?
of State,
Secretary of State, that's right, yeah.
It was a disastrous. The email scandals.
Yeah.
You think each one of these will knock her down, and especially when you see on the other side Bernie Sanders bring a very popular position about the connection with the big banks, they are the big friend of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
New liberal policy, which is her husband implemented everywhere around that. So still, she managed to keep going up, and Bernie Sanders and Trump, in spite of the irony, opposite side from each other, they bring a popular opinion, I think.
Yeah, it's strange that you could say that Bernie and Sanders and Donald Trump have similarities, but if you actually look at them, they're anti-establishment candidates. The public is so tired of them. Now, we're going to cover this a lot more in the next few months, and we're really going to dip into and try to get the facts on the case of how, if there's been injustices done in this California primary.
But coming back to history, there is one thing, and just a short statement. Whenever who is the president in the White House, the American policy are always consistent.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we should take it seriously about who is, and always usually to cover up on the major issue they have. So the last election we have Obama and the big hope and change he's talking
Yeah.
about, but in the end, I believe he was worse than George Bush. At least he took away that arrogance and the stupidity of the American policy. He brought
Yeah.
back the era of Henry Kissinger to go and manipulate government around the world by coups or CIA involvement. And the first victim was at that time, but people don't remember usually, Honduras president,
Yeah.
and Haiti later, who Mr. Obama sent them Mr. Clinton and George Bush, the most worst two people ever for the Haitian people. Obama when the earthquake happened.
Exactly.
So you can see,
The powers that be in the United States, no doubt. I mean, there's a control that's going on there that's overwhelming, and it's reflected in the media, particularly, and the media ownership, of course, is a big concern there. But I think there's always hope, Mazin. This is what I'm always saying is that,
I
there's
hope so.
always a chance to make something better. I think Bernie Sanders is a breath of fresh air in that department, and we'll just see what happens in the next few months.
It's always good in the end. I mean, any improvement for the people's economic situations in the end is good. I mean,
Yeah, and hopefully Bernie will stick in there until the convention, and then he can probably get some of his views better heard. Now, some of the other stories we're going to be covering in the next few months is, of course, the mass shooting in Orlando that happened just a few days ago, and the troubling aspects of the reporting on that, and also the facts of the case where you have a Muslim perpetrator, so-called, and we have a very, very quick conversion to Islamic fundamentalism and the supporting of ISIS that wasn't consistent with his regular life. We see a history of perhaps mental illness. We see a lot of things that we've seen in other cases in the San Bernardino shootings, as well as the Boston bombings, and even here in British Columbia with the Nuttall and Crowley case.
Yes, but just there is one small example give you what is reality and how media represent that reality. After 9/11, there is around like until 2015, until San Bernardino incident, there was around 400,000 deaths in the United States because of violence.
Yeah.
Shooting, guns, because of violence, 400,000 people died during that time.
Yeah.
Only 40, I'm not saying 40 people, it's little number, but when you have 40 people died and the majority of them were by, if you remember, the Dr. Hassan who went inside the military station and he shot, I think he shot like a big number. That is the majority of them. But in the end, you have the media represent the Muslim issue as is the issue.
Yeah, there's some troubling trends that we should plow over. So we're going to wrap up this segment. I just want to say that we're always looking for ideas for the show. And if you have any ideas that you'd like to send in, you can send it to walter@citizensforum.ca. And we'll happily take that information and perhaps use it on the show. And also, Citizens Forum is always looking for volunteers to help us complete this production. And if you are interested in getting involved in any way whatsoever, please get a hold of us. Thanks a lot, and stay tuned.